Everyone saw it happen. The lobby went quiet when security stopped me in front of the elevators, their hands hovering near radios, eyes fixed on my face. People I worked with stood close enough to hear, far enough to pretend they didn't. A manager read accusations aloud, slow and official, as if volume made them true. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I felt my body lock while the room decided who I was. Someone laughed nervously. Someone filmed. I stared at the carpet, counting breaths, realizing the humiliation wasn't the charge itself, but how easily everyone accepted it there. My name is Elise Harper. I was 34, a project lead at an investment firm downtown, and I'd never been in trouble with anyone more serious than building management over a parking pass. That morning I came in early because our senior partner, Paul Merrick, was bringing a new client. The meeting was supposed to decide whether our firm joined his umbrella group, which was a polite way of saying he would own us. I didn't make it past the lobby. The head of security, Danner, asked for my badge like it had stopped being mine. He kept his voice flat. "We have a report," he said. "We need you to wait here." "What kind of report?" I asked. He glanced past me at the mezzanine where half my office had gathered. "Fraud," he said. "Theft. Identity. Not question. Not concern. Something final. Something that made people step back." My supervisor, Carla, arrived a minute later, breathless, composed. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked, "Is this real?" That was the betrayal. Not the guard doing his job. Carla asking like she needed permission to doubt me. "I don't know what this is," I said. "Show me the paperwork." Carla shook her head fast. "Paul says we can't take chances," she replied. "The client is in the building." So that was it. Convenience over fairness. Image over truth. They needed a clean lobby more than they needed a person. Danner guided me into a small glass room off the lobby, the one they used for lost phones and small incidents. It was bright, tidy, and humiliating because everyone could see inside. Carla leaned toward the glass and lowered her voice. "If you fight this out here, you'll make it worse," she said. "Let them handle it." I nodded once. Arguing was exactly what they expected from someone caught. I sat down and pulled out my phone. My bank app showed nothing unusual. My credit files were frozen years ago after a data breach. Our firm tracked badge scans, laptop logins, even printer use. I'd learned to trust records more than reactions. Paper beats panic. Then my phone buzzed with an email from internal compliance. Subject: immediate hold, client funds/review pending. Timestamp: 8:41 a.m. I checked the lobby clock. 8:44. Whatever they'd filed had happened 3 minutes before security stopped me. That wasn't an investigation. That was a move. Carla's phone rang. She stepped away, angled her body so I couldn't read her face, and answered in a quiet rush. I still saw her mouth form the same word twice. "Paul." I leaned back and watched my own reflection in the glass. No tears. No shaking. Just a slow, cold understanding. Someone inside my firm had pulled a lever, and the building obeyed without question. Danner kept my badge in his hand the whole time, thumb over the photo, like covering my face made the accusation easier. Through the glass I saw coworkers pretend to check emails, pretend not to stare. Someone lifted a phone to record, then thought better of it and lowered it for now. The front doors opened again. A small girl slipped in, maybe 8 or 9, in an oversized hoodie and worn sneakers. She hovered by the revolving door like she was deciding whether to run. No one saw her. Everyone was watching me. The girl looked straight into the glass room and held my gaze like she'd been looking for one person in the whole building. Then she turned and started walking toward Paul Merrick's private elevator. I learned later that the report didn't start that morning. It started months earlier, quietly, in pieces small enough to ignore. At first it was an expense question that came back twice. Then a vendor invoice marked pending review that never cleared. I'd asked about both and been told it was a system glitch. Carla had smiled and said compliance was being careful. Careful always sounds reasonable. The pattern only became clear when I stopped reacting and started listing dates, times, who benefited, who stayed untouched. Every delay landed on my desk. Every doubt pointed toward me. Paul's name never appeared in the notes, even when the approvals carried his signature. The firm liked him. He brought money. He spoke certainty. Certainty gets protected. I thought about the first time I felt expendable. A late night years earlier when a client's transfer went wrong and the floor needed a reason before morning. Paul said, "Elise will sort it." Not because I caused it, but because I would stay until it was sorted. I did. He thanked me publicly. Then he filed the incident under my department. It didn't hurt then. It felt like trust. That's how it worked. Small sacrifices framed as responsibility. Each one taught the room who could absorb risk without complaint. Over time, that person becomes the answer to problems no one wants attached to their own name. In the glass room, my phone kept lighting up. A message from finance asking me to confirm a wire I hadn't seen. An automated alert about a password reset I didn't request. Someone was stacking paper while I sat visible and silent. I watched Paul arrive through the side entrance, tailored coat, calm stride. He didn't look toward me. He didn't need to. The building already spoke for him. When he reached the elevator, the little girl stepped into his path. Security didn't notice her at first. She was too small. Too ordinary. She said something I couldn't hear. Paul leaned down, impatient. She said it again, louder. His face changed. I saw the moment he stopped smiling. He waved security over, irritated. The girl pointed at his phone. At his car keys. At the parking badge clipped to his belt. She spoke fast now, urgent. Paul laughed once, sharp, then checked his watch. Security hesitated. It was easier to remove a child than question Paul. They reached for her shoulder. I stood up. "I'd like my phone back," I said, evenly. Danner glanced at Carla. Carla hesitated. That was new. Paul raised a hand, annoyed. "What is this?" he asked. The girl said one sentence that cut through the lobby. "They put something under your car." The room froze. Paul's smile returned, thinner. "That's enough," he said. "Call her parents." The girl shook her head. "I saw them," she insisted. "They talked about your meeting." That word did it. Meeting. Paul checked his phone again. He pressed a button. His voice dropped. He asked for facilities. Then he asked for police. The elevator doors stayed closed. In the glass room, Carla's phone buzzed again. This time she didn't look away when she answered. Paul stood very still, eyes on the girl, as if calculating whether certainty could outrun a fact he didn't control. I sat back down and waited, because waiting had finally become useful. The police arrived quickly, lights flashing against the glass. The girl stood with a guard now, small hands clenched, refusing to move. Paul spoke first, calm and practiced, explaining there had been a misunderstanding. He did not mention the meeting. He did not mention the car. He mentioned procedure. An officer asked who reported the device. Paul pointed toward the girl, then toward security, then finally toward me. "She's unstable," he said. We were already addressing internal issues. That was the crossing. He tried to hand them my silence like evidence. The officer looked at me and asked a simple question. "Do you have anything to add?" "Yes," I said. "Timestamps." I asked Danner to retrieve the badge logs. I asked facilities to pull the garage cameras. I asked compliance to open the ticket history. I spoke in lists, not sentences. The officer nodded and wrote. Carla stared at the floor. The girl kept talking, blurting details adults usually miss. 2 men. A crouch. A magnet. Words about a timer. She said she followed them because they laughed. One officer listened. Another went to the garage. Minutes passed. Then the radio crackled. A device was found under Paul's car, crude and real. The lobby emptied without drama. People drifted away, suddenly busy. Paul's certainty collapsed into irritation, then into quiet. The officer returned and asked Paul to step aside. Paul argued once. It sounded strange in the open air. The officer didn't raise his voice. He asked again. While they spoke, a detective approached me with a different tone. He asked about the report that started this morning. I showed him the compliance email and the times. He compared them to the badge scans and my login history. He raised an eyebrow and asked who had access to my credentials. Paul does, Carla said, too quickly. The detective wrote that down. The boundary wasn't the accusation. It was the attempt to trade my reputation for his escape. That was the moment I stopped hoping this would resolve quietly. The detective asked if I would consent to a device search. I did. Paul hesitated. He smiled and said of course, then asked for his lawyer. The detective nodded. Systems like consent when it's even. An ambulance arrived for the girl's scraped knees. She refused it until she knew the man would not drive. The officer promised. She finally sat, exhausted, brave in the way children are when adults fail them. Paul was escorted upstairs. Carla followed, hands wringing, asking if there was anything she could do. I told her to answer questions honestly. She nodded, relieved to be given a task. By evening, the lobby smelled like cleaner again. My badge was returned. No apology. The detective handed me a card and said the firm would be in touch. He thanked me for keeping records. As the doors closed behind me, I felt something lift. Not triumph. Not anger. The need to be believed had left me. Facts were moving now, without my voice pushing them. I stepped outside into evening traffic and listened to the city resume. Sirens faded. Doors slid shut. My phone stayed quiet. I walked home instead of taking a ride, choosing the long blocks where nothing asked me to explain. By the time I reached my apartment, emails had arrived, measured and careful. Access restored. Reviews scheduled. Nothing emotional. That was enough. I slept without rehearsing replies, trusting the sequence to continue, steady and impersonal. Tomorrow would prove whether silence could hold, and whether institutions corrected themselves without witnesses in plain daylight alone. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They came in the language institutions prefer. Neutral. Delayed. Written. The firm placed Paul on administrative leave pending investigation. That phrase appeared in an email sent to the entire floor before noon the next day. No names were mentioned in the subject line. No accusations. Just process. The kind people trust because it sounds careful. Compliance requested interviews. Finance froze approvals tied to Paul's credentials. IT reset access across shared systems. Each action was small on its own. Together, they rearranged power without noise. Carla asked to speak with me privately. I agreed, but only in a conference room with the door open. She apologized in the way people do when they regret consequences, not choices. She said she should have asked more questions. She said she felt pressure. She said Paul had always handled things. I listened. I didn't reassure her. Reassurance would have made it easier to forget. The detective called 2 days later. He didn't share details, just timelines. The device under Paul's car had been meant to trigger during his meeting. Someone wanted leverage. Someone had been paid. Phone records connected those men to an intermediary tied to Paul's side business. The same side business that had benefited from the wires flagged under my name. I wasn't surprised. Patterns end where they begin. The girl came back once with her aunt to retrieve a lost backpack. She recognized me immediately. She smiled like we shared a secret. I thanked her for speaking up. She shrugged. He was in a hurry, she said. That's when people don't listen. Security added her name to a list of people allowed inside without questions. It felt symbolic. It wasn't. It was policy. Paul resigned a week later. The announcement framed it as a mutual decision. The market responded politely. The firm's reputation steadied. My role was restored with a quiet note acknowledging an error in process. No one asked me to forgive anything. That helped. I declined the invitation to return to my old project. I moved to a different team with fewer shortcuts and more checklists. My days grew predictable again. Predictable felt earned. Outside work, my life stayed small. I trained. I cooked. I slept. Friends asked for the story. I gave them the version that fit in a sentence. There was a review. It resolved. They nodded, relieved to accept something clean. Sometimes I thought about the lobby. About how fast certainty spreads when it's convenient. About how silence looks like guilt when people want it to. I didn't dwell. Dwelling turns memory into performance. The folder on my laptop shrank as cases closed. I archived it when the last notice arrived. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't need to be ready anymore. The building changed security protocols. Compliance added a verification step. Small fixes. Real ones. That was the closest thing to an apology institutions offer. I ran into Carla months later at a cafe. She asked how I was. I said fine. She looked like she wanted to say more. I paid for my coffee and left. On my way out, I saw the girl across the street, older now in my mind, laughing with friends. Traffic moved. A light changed. People crossed when it told them to. I didn't lose my job that day. I lost the habit of carrying risk for people who mistook certainty for truth. The systems corrected themselves when given time and evidence. That was enough. Silence had done its work.